Welcome to part 24 of the Basic Training Booster Pass Edition. Today we're going to cover everything you need to know to play 3DS Rainbow Road on 150cc. The recommended build for this course is going to be our usual try-hard build of DK, Bitty Buggy, Azure Rollers, and Paper Glider. Hold down the item button so that you can use your mushroom as soon as the run begins. Then move to the right-hand side of the track and take these next 3 turns pretty much how your brain is telling you to take them. Mini Turbo into Super Mini Turbo into Super Mini Turbo with tight lines while grabbing the first 3 coins. Now this next strategy is just so cool. For those of you who watched my DK Jungle video, this is basically a repeated use of the orange boost ramp strats that we did on that course. After building up the Super Mini Turbo, start a left drift off the orange boost ramp, and then when you get the Mini Turbo, release it in midair and immediately start holding down the drift button again so that you can land in a right drift. We're going to basically rinse and repeat for the next 2 ramps with a right drift off the second ramp into a midair Mini Turbo release, into a left drift off the third ramp with yet another midair Mini Turbo release, into one more right drift with a normal trick off the last ramp, with that drift being used to help get us a lower trick. This is obviously a pretty complicated strategy, and to make it work optimally, you basically need to know how to soft drift. That's because the wider you can make each of your drift angles, the straighter your path is going to actually be, and this is going to save a ton of time over just slaloming hard left and hard right through the whole thing. When done optimally, this saves a few tenths of a second over tricking off all the ramps, but even if not done optimally, I found that you can pretty much just come out even, so I definitely recommend at least trying to learn how to do this. Now unfortunately, we're not quite out of the woods yet. This next set of ramps can be really frustrating if you don't have a good setup. But providing good setups for hard strats is kind of my thing, so here's what we want to do. After coming off the orange boost ramps, you want to immediately start a right drift and build up a Super Mini Turbo. Then, wait till you're almost fully off the ramp to do a Super Mini Turbo trick off the ramp, and land in a right drift on the edge of the track. This is basically the most difficult part of the whole strategy because if you take that turn too tightly then you'll fall off the track. But if done properly, you should be able to take a really tight line around the next turn without falling off and then grab the coin on the far right of the next ramp. And this will allow you to Mini Turbo trick off the next 2 ramps. For the last ramp, I suggest just grabbing the second coin from the right and straight up tricking off of that one. When you land, wait until you get kinda close to the boost ramp and then do a left hop into a wide right drift so that you can charge a Mini Turbo in midair and then super bounce off the mushroom by releasing the Mini Turbo just before you land on it, and then just tricking right after you bounce. It'll launch you way up the track, at which point if your timing is good, you can get 3 tricks off the wavy path before grabbing the last coin up the track and moving on to section 2. Now this super bounce is really tricky to get down properly, and it has a tendency to make you fly off the right hand side of the track. So if you're finding it difficult, then you can just trick off the mushroom, but just know that it will make your alignment kinda janky for the wavy section, which will make it difficult to get all 3 of those tricks. And with that, we are out of section 1. The rest of the track is thankfully pretty straightforward. Super Mini Turbo around the next turn and then do a right hop into a left drift off the glider ramp. You should have a Mini Turbo built up by this point, and it'll get released automatically so that you can do some glider vectoring to get back onto the track. I haven't talked much about coins yet because you're pretty much just grabbing every coin you see, except for the aforementioned final coin in section 1. But coins can be pretty tricky on this track, so if you're missing some, you can use the glider vectoring to snag a couple of extra coins. When you land from the glider, if you still only have 8 coins, then go wide a bit to grab the first coin. If you have 9 coins, then go tight around this turn and then just widen up to grab the second one. Now this next part is kinda tricky. We don't want to drift too tight because the goal here is to build up a Super Mini Turbo and immediately start another left drift so that we can hang out on the edge of the track, build up an Ultra Mini Turbo, and do some more glider vectoring. But as you might have guessed, falling off the track is definitely not out of the range of possibilities for the ways that things can go wrong here. But assuming you did everything correctly, once you land back on the track, make sure to quickly start a left drift and just clip the edge of the orange boost ramp. Chain that boost into a Mini Turbo and then just drift around the next 2 turns, clipping the next 2 orange boost ramps around the right turn and the first orange boost ramp around the final left turn. You want to try and build up a Super Mini Turbo around here if you can, and then it's just a bunch of tricks off the wavy portion of the track before making your way down to the moon. I should point out that as you probably noticed, there's a ton of holes on this portion of the track, and you want to hang out kinda close to the middle to avoid them. Note that if you do fall though, you'll just get down to the moon earlier, so you won't die or anything, but it is really slow to have that happen. Now that we're on the moon, finishing up section 2 is actually kind of a tricky affair depending on your pace. You want to trick off the next 2 craters, and then as soon as you land, jump into another right drift. But the problem is that if you get here at an awkward time, there'll be a gigantic chain chomp in your way that's going to make the positioning really precise. So if that happens, just start the drift right before moving on to section 3. Regardless of how you got there, what you want to do is use your mushroom to ideally build up an Ultra Mini Turbo around the first turn in section 3. although you'll have to settle for a super mini turbo if you needed to start that drift late. Now once you get that mini turbo, make your way to the middle of the track with these weird looking Wii U Rainbow Road-esque strips of track. They behave like the waterfalls in Wild Woods or Big Blue and make you go faster, so you want to make sure to spend as much time on the last one as possible. And while you're doing that, pay attention to what's going on up the track, because once we go into this gigantic tunnel, the goal is to hit all of the orange boost pads, including the one at the very end. Now I haven't mentioned this yet, but since we got to the moon, we've actually been in F-Zero physics, and so when we come out of the tunnel, we're going to go off the first orange boost ramp, hold a 12 o'clock position on the joystick to get down to the track quickly, drift off the second orange boost ramp, and then hold that drift off the third one. Taking advantage of the F-Zero physics will allow us to hold some down and left angles to build up an ultra mini turbo by the time we land, and at this point, all we have to do is wait for that boost to run out, start a right drift, use our mushroom around the right turn, and then finish up the track with a super mini turbo around the last turn and do a trick off the last ramp. Now that's it for my strategies. Let's talk about the world record a bit though. There's not that much that's different between it and my run, however there are two major differences in strategy. The first, as you might have guessed, is that they do motion glider on both ramps instead of normal glider vectoring like we did. The second I hinted at earlier, and it has to do with all that stuff after the orange boost ramps on section 1. After tricking off the second to last ramp, they land in a right drift and then jump before building up a mini turbo, landing in a right drift off the final ramp. That weird looking mini turboless drift is an example of a fairly new piece of tech, which is often referred to as a Kusan slide or a slide jump. I've got a whole video on this topic that I've linked to in the description for you to check out, but the basic idea is that you trick and then land in a drift. Now if you're in the middle of a drift, then pressing the jump button as soon as a trick boost runs out will cause you to get a little boost to your speed. Now obviously what we just saw is that when they pressed the jump button, that actually resulted in a jump, but they actually do the exact same thing at the very end of the run, where they take a super tight line around the final turn, trick off the ramp, land in a drift, and then press the jump button as soon as they fall off the track. Now even though no actual jump happened here, they still got that boost of speed, which allowed them to save a little bit of time before crossing the finish line and finishing the run. Now that's it for all the strats. Let's talk a bit more about the track while checking out my current personal best. And by the way, if you found the video helpful so far, please don't forget to drop a like and a comment to let me know, since this is by far the best way to help the video get spread to more people. Thank you all very much for that, I really do appreciate it. Now, 3DS Rainbow Road. I'm gonna be honest with you all, Section 1 is a pretty big nightmare to learn. Between the orange boost ramp strats where you can inexplicably lose multiple tenths of a second for seemingly no reason at all, the ramps immediately following that where I've fallen off more times than I'd care to admit, and the super bounce, which is really difficult to execute in a way that actually lets you get back onto the track, I think it's safe to say that I lost basically all of my attempts here. Honestly, outside of Section 1, there's just not that much going on in the track, and really I'm not sure exactly how to feel about that. Let me be a little bit more clear about what I mean. The track is decently long, pretty fun to learn, and it's got a ton of stuff to learn. But there's not a lot of room to optimize in the sense that, you know, if you play through the track a couple of times, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly what you need to do to actually play it properly. Aside from that ending slide jump where they fall off the track, all the rest of the strats were basically figured out on day 1, and so the rest just comes down to practice. This is in contrast to a track like Ribbon Road where we're still figuring out new strats, and we recently saw a full second time save within the last month and a half. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the course is somehow both complex and fairly straightforward at the same time. All that being said though, this is definitely my favorite iteration of Rainbow Road we've gotten so far. And it's kind of funny because anybody who's watched my main track ranking video will know that I rated the Wii U version of Rainbow Road really high. But as more and more DLC waves have dropped, I feel like I've come to realize that I just don't enjoy that track all that much. And I think that this version of Rainbow Road is really the nail in the coffin there. And not only that, but I don't think anyone can argue that this is by far the best looking Rainbow Road that we've gotten so far. Maybe even one of the best looking overall tracks in the entire game. And that's everything you need to know to play 3DS Rainbow Road on 150cc. Don't forget to drop a like before you go, and make sure to subscribe for more weekly tutorials. Thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to do some basic training, and as always, I will see you in the next video.